Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got my list of the 10 knives that have most closely achieved the term Excalibur. What does Excalibur mean? I have a lot of new subs since the last time I discussed this term. I describe Excalibur, or that term essentially means to me the ideal folding knife for me. Not necessarily for everybody, but for me. I have a series called Quest for the Perfect Folding Knife, which is actually in a playlist on my channel where it's a multi-part series where I explain every last little tiny thing I look for, whether it's utilitarian or not, whether it's reasonable or not, just things that oh, it's so crispy. It's exactly what I want in a knife, right? And I have yet to find Excalibur. I have a bunch of knives that are close. These 10 are actually the closest on the list, right? But I've yet to actually find what I consider to be perfect. It's important to remember that all of you have your own unique Excalibur, right? You have your own wants, your own needs when it comes to a folding knife. This is the result of a crazy knife person who's been obsessed with this stuff for a long time and has handled so many different types of things. I've realized I know exactly what I want, but I have not yet found exactly that. But a bunch of knives have actually come close, and I'm going to share with you guys, out of the last 1,300 uploads that I've done, which knives have actually come the closest. Thank you so much to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there's a link down in the description. And please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Not all of these knives are available. Some of them are available. I will link them down below if they are. A lot of these knives are very expensive. It's just it's just the result of everything that I have handled. So let's go ahead and get started here. By the way, these are in order. And the first three are actually not on the list. They are sort of honorable mentions. The first one here is the Quiet Carry Drift. This is a lot of you guys know I love the Shaman. The Drift has very similar ergonomic lines to the Shaman. And if you want context, again, if you want context on what it is that I look for, right, when it comes to Excalibur, that series has every last little thing in there. It's hard to go over it in one video, right? But anyways, the ergonomic lines on the I keep wanting to say Waypoint, the Drift, are very similar. It's got the textured titanium on it, which is something that I really, really like. Honestly, it's just a little bit... I understand that thinness actually helps in cutting performance. I kind of like heft. I kind of like solidity and a little bit of chunkiness, right? So this is there. It's just not quite... I'd like to see a bigger version of this, a little bit longer, maybe a little bit thicker, just to make me feel good about the exit, like the heft that I'm looking for. But this is super close. Not an inexpensive knife, a really excellent knife, honestly. The materials all the way around this thing is excellent. It just didn't quite do it for me. Next up, the Koenig Arias, specifically the non-flipper version. I need to handle one of these in titanium. I've handled 3 or 4 titanium flipper Ariases, which is up at the top. And then a non-flipper version. The only one that I've ever handled was the one at the bottom. That's the one in the copper dust carbon fiber. It's okay. I prefer titanium. I think this might get bumped up to the actual top 10 if I handled one in titanium. It's very, very close to exactly what I'm looking for. And for anybody who's never experienced an Arias, they are super expensive, but my goodness, are they amazing. So another honorable mention. And moving on here, the third honorable mention. Look, the Strider SNG is very close to everything that I want. I need to handle one of these in full titanium. I've handled the PT in titanium. I've got a Strider SNG Auto in titanium. I want the manual version in the medium size. I want it in textured titanium. I want to see it contoured, and I actually have a picture of what that would look like. And funny enough, I think this might actually, if I ever get a chance to handle this exactly, this knife might actually be everything I'm looking for. This is old. It is long gone. I found it on Monkey Edge. I think it was from 2015 or 2016. I think this knife sold for $1,700. It's an MSC Performance Series SNG with diamond textured titanium, contoured, the pocket clips in the right place. It's got the external stops. It's got the wow factor with the, the blade being a compound grind, right? I don't know what steel it's in, but if you want to know what Excalibur, I think, looks like to me, the culmination of everything that I look for together, this is probably it. Unfortunately, this knife is gone, and I have no idea who owns it now. I sure would like to know. Yeah, had I handled one of these Striders, I think the Strider would be bumped way up on the list. So there you go. Moving on to the actual list. Number 10, the ZT-0562. Of course. I love this knife. I've loved it for a long time. It's actually the reason that I got into Hinderer knives. This is titanium. This is now, what is it? Is it 20 CV now? Right? Great flipping action, external stops. It's missing the contouring that I want. It's missing the texturing that I want. The pocket clip is super deep, but honestly, I don't really prefer my knives to carry that deep. And there's just some, I mean, this is a super high-end production knife, or well, it's a high-end American-made production knife. These come in at about $280. You can absolutely buy this right now. It's down in the description. It's one of my most recommended knives of all time. There's just a couple of things holding it back from being way up higher on the list, but rest assured, this is still one of my very favorite folding knives of all time. And number 10 is not something to look over on this list. I've put a lot of thought into it. Into this, and this is absolutely recommendable. This is ZT's best knife right now, hands down, like by a long shot. That's my opinion. Moving on here to number 9. This is a weird one. This is the Steelcraft series Bodega. It's actually this is a bag knife, but it's actually a collaboration with Riot, and so Riot made these. The actual Bodega is much more expensive. This collaboration version, unfortunately, is gone now. These came in S35 VN in titanium. This had the textured titanium. It had the contouring. It had the forward choil. It had the ability to reverse flick it because of the fuller. It had the jimping in the right places, right? The pocket clip was not my favorite thing in the world, and some of the jimping in some areas was really aggressive. But I mean, everything else truly was great. There was some excess busyness on the knife. I like my knives to be straight lines and a little more simple. The detail, you know, the complexity in the fine detail. This was a little bit overboard on the busyness for me, but my goodness, was this thing amazing. Unfortunately, like I said, these are gone. And for those of you who have got a sharp eye, this is actually the 3-inch. The one that I liked was the 3.5-inch. The 3.5-inch only came in this configuration. It came in a lot of configurations. The 3.5-inch did not come in a plain tumbled blade, which is a big deal to me. The 3-inch, for whatever reason, did. So the version I had was a satin finish, and it was nice, but I prefer tumbled. I also couldn't find an exact picture, and I didn't want to dig all the way back through my Instagram. So this looks like it might be a really big knife. This particular one you're seeing is actually a 3-inch. The one that I'm referring to, though, is actually the 3.5-inch, which is exactly the same as this, except it had a satin finish blade. Wonderful, wonderful knife. Moving on here, this is the Ferrum Forge Archbishop 2.0. An absolute sleeper of a knife for me. This is, it's either 20 CV or M390, which are analogs to each other. Has the reverse flick opening device or mechanism, whatever you want to call that, the slot in the blade, right? Has the flipper tab, has the forward choil, has contoured titanium, has the gear pattern backspacer, which is something I like alongside of standoffs. Unfortunately, it's got T6 screws, and the titanium wasn't textured. Other than that, this thing is amazing. Again, I don't think you can, I think maybe there's a couple of these still floating around out there. I don't like the ones with the milling pattern, and I don't like the ones with the big chunky dragon scale or fish scale pattern on them. I want diamond textured, very specifically. I'll show you guys more examples of that. But it was also missing an additional, like I like the external stops. I like that extra feeling of solidity, that both lateral and horizontal solidity in the lockup, right? So this was very close. Not quite what I was looking for, but I was like, oh my gosh, what an amazing knife. Absolutely. Moving on here, the Les Georges VECP version 3. Either the flipper or the non-flipper, they're both excellent. This one's missing the forward choil. It's missing the external stops that I like. It's missing the contouring. But there is a version of it that is textured in a way that is actually appealing to me, even though it is not diamond textured. Had they done this essentially in the exact same texturing that they did, like ProTech did an auto rock eye, which the VECP is based on the rock eye through Les Georges. They did a faux bolster with a line through it up right around where the forward, not the forward choil, but the primary choil for the index finger, right? And then the rest of it was knurled, which is also preferable, however you want to say that, right? Blade profile is awesome. A perfect version of this would be no flipper tab, a forward choil, external stops, and exactly what they did with the rock eye. Unfortunately, the pocket clip I love, I just don't like the position of it. They have prioritized the lanyard hole above the pocket clip. I still can't deny that I love this thing so much. There are a lot of different versions of this, different collaborations. This is the mid-tech version. These are expensive. You can find them floating around out there. I think they start at like $425. Love this knife. Very, very good. I very much love this knife. Moving on here. This is the, I always forget the name here. I'm gonna stutter around it. So the reason I'm forgetting is because I've only ever, number one, there's a lot of information flying around in my head, and number two, it's because I've only handled one of these. The TAD, or Triple Lot Design Dauntless. This is actually the third generation of it. There is a fourth generation of it that is contoured, and I'm guessing I would like that one more. That might bump this one up the list if I had handled the contoured version. This is missing basically nothing except for the external stops. The thumb studs do not contact the frame. I understand it's not necessarily something that is needed. I'm not saying that because I want it on my Excalibur, heavy quotes, that it's absolutely necessary in every knife. It's just something that I like. It doesn't necessarily have to be external either. It can be a pin that follows the blade and sort of garages into the frame, as long as the pressure is being mitigated away from the pivot in sort of an odd cut. That's why I like those. The standard stop pin setup is fine. It's just that's where all the force is, right? The force left and right is not mitigated. The pivot takes all of that. That's why I like that setup. But exceptional. Also exceptionally rare. Very difficult to get your hands on, and if you can find one, they're going to be at least $400, right? Secondary market prices on these things are ridiculous. There's also a million different versions of the TAD Dauntless, because they make Dauntless versions of, they make like Hinderer Dauntless, and they make Strider Dauntless, and they do all of these different collaborations. This is just the Dauntless, Triple Lot Design, or TAD. Excellent, excellent knife. Also runs on phosphor bronze. It's also missing the textured titanium. I would really like to see some texturing on the titanium, but the form that it takes is really, really great. I think you guys can see a pattern here, right? Those of you who haven't watched my Quest for the Perfect Folding Knife series, you're kind of seeing a pattern, what it is that I'm looking for, right, with the ergonomics and the materials, things like that. These also come in, I think, M390 or 20CV now. They may come in an S35EN. Either of those, I'd say either of those steels I'm happy with. Moving on here, this is the Holt Spectre, specifically the version 4. This knife actually added an element that I realized I wanted in Excalibur that I did not include in the series, and this is really important. I have come to find that exposed frame locks, in my opinion, are inferior to a full titanium frame that has a countersunk titanium liner lock. The nice thing about that is that the liner lock itself, that's just how you define it, can actually be a little bit thicker than a traditional liner lock, because if it's countersunk into the titanium frame, then it has nearly the thickness of the frame to work with in terms of surface contact on the tang, right? Because it's sunk into the frame. This does a couple of things. Number one, it locks the blade out arguably as hard or as strong as a titanium frame lock. And number two, the frame lock is not, the lock is not exposed to the hand during use. The pressure is on the frame, right? So you can squeeze it as hard as you want, right? You can use it as hard as you want. It's never going to affect the geometry of the lockup. And you can put your hands wherever you want when you flip it, because your fingers aren't causing excess pressure on the lock. That was a huge deal for me. Now this knife is it technically has like the external stop thing, right? Blade is beautiful, very simple, fully flat ground. The handle scales are semi-contoured, and even though this has the feather texturing, they do make a knurled texturing. They have these lines up at the top, and I'm getting really nitpicky here, but that's, if I'm going to define Excalibur, I got to be nitpicky, right? This is my Excalibur. This is what I want. I want full contouring. I don't want to, the extra lines look nice on this knife, but I want to see the whole thing contoured. I want extra simplicity with extra, like minute details when you really look up close. I want the thing to basically look almost boring, it's the opposite of, the Strider I showed earlier is really crazy, right? But it's hard to define. But I want to see that simplicity, the initial aesthetic of the knife is kind of boring, and then you get up close and you're like, oh, look at all these nice little details. I love the size of the hardware. I love the backspacer, right? I love the pivot hardware. I love the overall finish work on this knife. I'm just really, really into this. Just a few things that kept this from being absolutely perfect for me, but gosh, it was close. Moving on here, the ZT0392. This is, in my opinion, the greatest thing to ever come out of Zero Tolerance. The ZT0562 Ti is the best ZT knife that is currently available in their line. The ZT0392, being a factory custom that was discontinued a while ago, is the best thing they have ever done. This is modeled after the Hinderer Eclipse. It has the external stops. It has amazing flipping action. It is, at the time, it was better than the actual Eclipse. And honestly, it's about on par with Hinderer knives right now. This was taken a step further than the standard production models. This had actual Hinderer custom hardware, had more handwork that went into it. And they ran about the same price, about $400. It is missing the texturing. It's missing the contouring, right? I'm really attracted to this black and green one, which is totally different than everything else you guys have seen. It's been pretty monochromatic up to this point. There's something weird about this black and green. I don't know what my fascination with this particular one, because these came in a lot of different colorations, right? My fascination with this one in particular, I don't know what the deal was, but I just love this thing. Blade profile is cool. Honestly, I'd prefer just a regular drop point blade. I love the Eclipse body. This doesn't have the forward choil. It doesn't have the contouring of the texturing, right? But gosh, everything else is just spot on. Unfortunately, now if I want to buy this knife, I have to go on the secondary market and pay at least $550, which is more than an actual Hinderer XM18 or Eclipse, which is crazy, right? And then I have to cross my fingers and hope that it's actually in good shape. I have not worked up the courage to do that again. I've done it once and got burned. And that was a couple of years ago. I don't think I'll be doing that again. That was actually 3 years ago. Moving on here, the Spyderco Shaman. This does not have the external stops, and it is not full titanium, but it is, there is something about, you can buy this knife right now, $200. I'm waiting for Flytanium to make this thing, to make some titanium scales for this thing. They said that they were kind of screwing around with it, and I'm hoping they're still going to do it. I love the scales on this. I love the ergonomics of this knife. It is nearly perfection. For anybody, what about that nub that comes around and touches your finger as it's as you're releasing the compression lock? Isn't that like a huge flaw? No! What are people's deal? Literally, it took me for anybody that's like, oh, I've heard that's a flaw. Moving your finger out of the way of the compression lock as the blade comes back down is pretty much second nature. It's not even something that the last time somebody said that, I was like, I forgot that people complained about. As somebody who owns and uses the Shaman regularly, if you've ever heard someone say that and call it a flaw or a deal breaker, you can wave that off. That is the most ridiculous complaint I have ever heard about. Of all the nitpicky things that people complain about with knives, oh man, I'm so sorry. If I'm hurting your feelings, I'm sorry. But that is absolutely ridiculous. Don't worry about that at all. That is not a flaw. That is not an issue. The Shaman is so easy to operate. The compression lock is wonderful on it. The ergonomic lines are exceptional. The blade profile is great, right? I love the backspacer, the size of the hardware. I love all that stuff. What would make this knife absolutely perfect for me is some form of external stop, even though it doesn't really need it, right? Some form of external stops, some titanium. In fact, like my true Excalibur is absolutely in my mind is modeled off the Shaman. Some texturing on the titanium scales, man. As soon as Flytanium makes some scales for this, I will have them sent off and textured, and they'll come back, and I will create as close as I possibly can to my ideal knife. But yes, the Shaman is absolutely recommendable. It's absolutely one of my favorite knives of all time. Moving on here, one that got bumped way up the list. This is number 2 on the list, the Andrew Demko AD20. Talk about a knife that has almost everything that I want. Very Hinderer-y, but like just like a different, it's almost like a Hinderer doppelganger from another universe. This has the slot for the reverse flick. It's got thumb studs. It has an amazingly fidgety and at the same time, amazingly powerful lock. This knife truly does not need the external stops. That shark lock. Oh my God. What is wrong with me? Shark lock. My God, I'm never going to hear the end of that. Shark lock is very fidgety, very strong, very reliable, very easy to manipulate. Oh, I just love it. I love this. This is one of my favorite knives of 2020, perhaps my favorite knife of 2020. The only thing that I would want different on this knife is some contouring on the scales, and for the pocket clip to be just a little bit different. They do make this in full titanium, and I will own that knife. Nick Shabazz would not sell me his. He wouldn't. I begged him. He wouldn't. I will own this knife in full titanium. It's going to be expensive. It's a $600 knife in full tie, $425, I think, for G10. My goodness, is this an amazing... I'm getting chills thinking about this knife. Love it. All right, moving on to number one. The number one knife that is as close as, as close as it can possibly be to my definition of Excalibur is a knife that I own, and it's a knife that I have been holding on to for a long time. Very happy with this knife. Just took this picture a little bit ago. This is the Hinderer XM18 3.5-inch Gen 6 Tri-Way DLT Trading exclusive non-flipper fullard spear. If that's not the longest name for a knife you've ever heard, I couldn't imagine one, longer. This is I always forget if it's M390 or 20 CB. I've got it right here. M390, tumbled blade. Has a fuller you can use as a reverse flick device. Has external stops that also double as thumb studs that you can use for the same thing. This has textured titanium, perfectly textured titanium. Large fasteners, a pocket clip that I absolutely love. This has no flipper tab. It has the forward choil, making it an ergonomic joy. There's only one thing missing from this knife, and that's contouring. Truthfully, having finally handled the Holt Spectre V4, the ideal version of this knife would actually be a full titanium frame with a countersunk titanium liner lock. And before people say, that's ridiculous, he'll never do that, wait a sec. I can't believe I said that. Wait a second. The skinny 3 inches are liner locks. Now, they're not countersunk, but he's messed around with that. He has also made a prototype XM18 3.5-inch. You can find a picture of it in the gallery of past custom knives on the Hinderer Knives website. He has made a bolstered frame. It's got titanium bolsters on it and G10 scales underneath it, and then underneath that is a titanium liner lock. So that has existed on the XM18 before, but not in production form. So if Hinderer contoured this thing and they made a countersunk titanium liner lock and it was full titanium, right, it would be perfect. But this version of it is very perfect. And people ask me all the time, when are you going to sell that? If you sell it, I want dibs. No. I'm keeping this one until Hinderer comes out with something that I think might be better. And it's still unlikely that I would sell it. I would sell one of the other ones that I have. I love this knife. I love this knife. It has been crowned Excalibur, or the closest to Excalibur, on my channel for quite a while, since I received it, actually. I very much love this knife. It's very difficult to get titanium scales for the Hinderer XM18 as of October 2020. This is an older titanium scale that is unmilled. I understand most people prefer the milled ones anyway, but it makes it all the more special to me because I like that heft and solidity. And as far as I know, they're not going to make unmilled scales anymore. So this is a solid titanium scale, and I just love it. This is the most perfect of the most perfect that I have ever handled, and it's expensive. The XM18s, you can buy XM18s right now. I'll link them down below. Lots of different versions, right? But this specific version is not available right now. They come in at $425 at base, and then adding a titanium scale to it, if you can find it, will add at least another $200. And that's the only thing that you do to it. These knives can be customized, and you can buy parts direct from Hinderer, or, well, usually through retailers. And you can add more money to it if you want to. These can get very expensive very fast, but they are very satisfying for the money. If you're going to spend a lot of money on a knife, right, if you're going to dip into that $400 price point, the Hinderer XM18 is definitely the knife that I recommend to people. It's just so consistent and wonderful. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it as far as the top 10 knives that I have deemed worthy or nearly worthy of the title Excalibur. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that it was at least mildly entertaining. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.